Good evening, and welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. And there's an old saying that's either a blessing or a curse, depending on how you look at it. It says, may you live in interesting times. And we do. There's lots of political change going on, lots of groundswell from various parts of the country and various viewpoints. And we have with us tonight someone who has been intimately involved in that kind of groundswell and changing the political landscape. Diane Hewitt, pleasure to have you here. You're president of Indivisible in DuPage County, and also township committee man, committeeman, committee woman, committee person?
Vice Chair of Lyle Township Democratic Organization.
Vice Chair, yes. So welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here. So we're, as you heard from my brief introduction, political upheaval is kind of the watchword around the world today. Actually, you see it in countries all across the globe. So we've seen some significant change in DuPage County over the last few years. And I recall some people who were on this show some years ago, quite a few, who were starting an organization called Turn DuPage Blue, meaning get the Democratic vote out, which seemed like a pipe dream at the time because it was so solidly Republican. And yet today, it has dramatically changed. So how did that happen?
There was an amazing conglomeration of events that happened, bringing about a groundswell of Democratic votes that we've never had. We actually, in this last election, had the majority of the townships go Democratic, which was very exciting. But I really believe that it was a variety of candidates that believed that for the first time ever, first-time candidates, new to the political landscape, believed that they could, more than we've ever had. We never had as many candidates in our primaries, and we turned out a record number in the primaries, increasing the primary vote 630%.
630%?
Mm-hmm.
Good Lord.
Now,
is that because of changing demographics too? I mean, there's a different population now than there was 10 years ago, say, in DuPage?
It's a variety of issues. You have a changing demographics, people from Chicago moving into the suburbs. You have more brown people that are there. You have a lot of women that have become extremely activated. You have a lot of activists that have never been so involved, and there's been a whole lot of creativity and flourishing of activist organizations, combined with the Democratic groups that have grown by enormous standards as well.
So now this abundance of candidates that you talked about, were they recruited? Did they just emerge on their own? How did this come to be?
They were recruited. They also self-recruited themselves, and so
as opposed to self-recruiting someone else.
Right.
Oh,
True.
Yes.
So it was a really exciting time last year or 2 years ago in 2017. We were personally trying to recruit, for example, 6 congressional candidates. Originally, when Peter Roscom was starting his campaign, we realized that somebody needed to run against him. Little did we know how many people ended up
were willing to step up and run.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it was literally from February 2017 on when we were looking for candidates.
And now when you say we, you're speaking on behalf of the Indivisible organization, right? Or is it the Democratic Party?
Actually, for the 6th district in particular, it was Indivisible DuPage. And we started, there was a variety of people in February that got together with a really exciting protest that made Rachel Maddow, and we eventually started the Coalition for a Better Illinois 6th. And
so talk a little bit about Indivisible and what it is and how it came. It's a relatively new organization, right?
It is.
So where did it come from? What is it doing? How does it work?
Okay. It's a national-based organization focused on, in the past we were focused on the midterms. Right now we're focused on the presidential, but it was started by congressional staffers, Ezra Klein, and oh gosh, one of Leah, I'm blanking on the other.
That's okay, I wouldn't know them. You could make it up and I wouldn't know the difference, right?
And any which way, what ended up happening was they were very upset after Hillary Clinton had lost, and they took the lessons from what the Tea Party had done with very little money, with very few people, and they wanted to multiply our efforts in the resistance using some of their tactics that had worked.
When you say resistance, resistance to what?
Donald Trump.
To Donald Trump, okay.
And his tactics.
Yeah.
When we were all born out of, organically, the group was born literally from the resistance to Donald Trump.
And that came about, though, as soon as he was elected. So without seeing how he would govern at all, this group decided it was time to resist in any case, right?
We could see what was going to happen. Most of us could easily see that our health care was going to be threatened. We knew that was an immediate issue.
Which, of course, has happened.
Exactly. We knew that we would have issues at the border, that immigration was going to become a problem. It was really easy to see the writing on the wall when in November, literally the day after he was elected. So I started organizing the day after he was elected.
And in fact, most of what you would have been concerned with has in fact come to pass, right? But it's interesting. Resistance is a word that it sparks, I think, fear or conflict in the minds of many people. Like you think about World War II, the French resistance to Nazi occupation. Well, that was necessarily, it was wartime. It was necessarily a violent and underground kind of organization. So in this context, what does resistance mean?
It means that we're generally educating, Indivisible DuPage focuses on educating the voters and the general public about the issues that are going to be put to them from the elected officials and how they affect their daily lives. So we tend to focus on issues. We've done a variety of different forums on immigration, on health care, on a variety of different candidate forums at all different levels. We've really tried to make sure that people understood that the local elections, the county board races, the forest preserve races in particular, affect them in a lot of ways more than the races that get all the attention. The state races are critical. The fact that we now have a very viable state and local Democratic platform has been an enormously, has really helped the legislative session that we've just seen.
Well, a governor that's getting along with the legislature as opposed to one who fought them at every turn, right?
That really helped too.
It does. It
I
changes
don't
the
know how
dynamic.
many different levels, so this last
Yeah.
session has been
Yeah.
an amazing thing to witness.
But it's interesting that you talk about the local races. This is something that's a pet peeve of mine, that when I talk to people about voting, then they'll sometimes say, oh, well, I only vote in presidential elections. And my response is, yeah, well, the president does not set your property taxes. Those are all the local guys. And it's hard to get that message across. So how were you able to, I mean, what you talk about town halls, I mean, how were you able to organize these events and get people to attend and absorb the lessons?
Well, we, in particular, I was focused on creating a lot of those events, producing them. So we would have we focused on having good speakers that were really educated, that were informative, that were more like edutainment type of things. We really did a lot with networking in Facebook, with networking with each other, in a variety of different ways with the townships, and literally being creative with our canvassing and whatnot by picking up more and more volunteers. Actually, somebody was canvassing when I started getting involved. They had canvassed me. So on a variety of different ways, we've just tried to have as many different types of events as possible to bring as many people in. But the forums in particular, we put them on my podcast. We would try to advertise.
Candidate forums? Yeah, okay.
That's what actually started Indivisible DuPage IDP TV. And in all reality, it was just the plethora of candidates and trying to make sure that we got their wonderful backgrounds and their experiences that we'd never had to advertise before. We had just really struck a lot of creative nerves. And
now, you did most of this without much funding, right? This was all volunteer?
Yes, and a lot of us paid a lot of money into it. I mean, I don't know how many thousands of dollars I've spent in the resistance, but we've also focused on trying to have new fundraisers and whatnot. So it's been a whole learning lesson on a variety of different levels, but we've done it on a shoestring. So
Well, and I think that's remarkable because we see, like, the estimates for the 2020 presidential election about how much will be spent just on that office is already in the billions on each side. So that's an enormous sum of money. And the average citizen would think, oh, why bother? I can't compete at that level, can't get close. But here's a counterexample, right?
we had truth is the other thing. We had truth, and I hate to say this, but we had the issues on our side. And for example, with Peter Roskam, the more that people saw what he was really like, meaning that, for example, he would not want to vote, he refused to have a town hall with his constituents in 10 years. And so we literally, me in particular, and a variety of other people, bird dogged him and just literally went around trying to get him to answer a question, never would. So he would just run away, and we had a variety of different tapes of him, videos of him running away. Mm-hmm. And so
that's not the kind of thing, if you position yourself as a leader, that's not really what you want to have as your video evidence, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Is him not being able to talk to anybody about, the NRA funding or anything like that.
Now, for those who don't know, we should note that Peter Roskam was a United States representative in the Congress and had been there for many terms, right?
6 terms.
6 terms, and was considered unassailable by his own party and by, frankly, lots of the Democrats. And yet, your team was able to look at that and say, we're not giving him a free ride.
Right.
Let's challenge this.
Right.
And you won, or
Yes.
your candidate won. Right?
Yes. It was very exciting for Representative Sean Casten, who's just been amazing to see in the last few months, especially today when he announced that he had now has decided that he endorses impeachment, which is very exciting for us, believing that it needs to be done.
What does that bring the number to?
I think we're at 44 in the House.
It must be larger than that. Well, it doesn't matter. It's lots. It's not a majority, but
Right.
it's
we're
growing.
not
Right.
enough.
I know this is a touchy subject. There's a huge debate about it, impeachment. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Is it politically wise or is it politically stupid? And there are compelling arguments on each side. So do you feel that this is largely a political question or a moral one?
Moral. At a certain point, you have to decide that what you're doing is really fulfilling the social contract and for a greater good. You cannot just be, I think part of politics is a calling for making sure that our society is working in as healthy as possible for as many people as possible, and without without ensuring a rule of law and a checks and balance, then we've skidded off into something other than
Dangerous territory.
Yes, and beyond dangerous, in my opinion. So I think there has to be a point, however many laws he's obviously broken, it's in the hundreds. It's not like it's a minor issue. It's not like it's a consensual sexual issue, which has happened in the past. It is not a Clinton issue. It's so much more than a Nixon issue.
Really, you think this is more serious than
Watergate,
Nixon?
by far. This is not just a break-in of a couple of guys that then went into a bunch of obstruction of justice. This is so much more because of the depth of how many different committees are investigating him? Was it 17 or? There's a lot.
I lost track.
It's easy to lose track, and there's so much that it's just a wealth. Whether you decide to say that he has has an emoluments issue, whether it's I really feel like there is something to collusion. I feel like obviously Mueller didn't believe that it wasn't an issue, or he would have said that he had been cleared of everything. He very much didn't say it, so it was like a negative.
The opposite. He said this is not an exoneration, and had we been able to, we would have, but we couldn't. Though everything here has become a political football, and as you may know, if you follow the other side of the argument, the Trump camp, there is no law breaking, and there is no collusion, there was no obstruction of justice, that this is in fact a coup orchestrated by those who oppose Trump. And that argument actually carries a lot of weight with the people who hear it. So there's a tremendously solid base of people who believe fervently that this is the right guy and he's the right leader and it's the right time for him, and that it's just this cabal of evildoers who are trying to bring him down from inside. How does one speak to that?
Well, in all reality, it's all about reaching 270 in 2020. And so what...
That would be electoral votes for those who aren't inside baseball, right?
Yes. And so in all reality, I think that the local blue states must work with the swing states in a national way that we've never done. Indivisible in particular is working with a variety of our networks. We have a weekly state call that organizes us in the ways that I don't think the Democratic Party has ever utilized. But we are going to affect the swing states, and we're going to make sure that they have as many advantages when the eventual nominee is chosen. We will get behind that nominee no matter who it is, and we will vote blue no matter who. They are all fabulous candidates, and we will be proud to represent whomever against Trump.
Well, so let's come back to the local, because national politics is it's a huge task. But since we're talking about local and how people can be effective at a local level, let's come back to the example of former Congressman Peter Roskam. So you organized these bird dogging events and tried to get him to come to town halls. But since a lot of people don't pay attention to local politics, somehow you broke through, because we were talking before the show that in 2016 he had won by 18 points, and in 2018 he lost by 7. That's a turnaround of 25 points, which is enormous. It's unheard of in political circles. How did you do that?
We did two things. Anytime in politics you're looking to really focus on firing whomever it is that you're looking to fire. So this was Peter Roskam, and then hiring whomever you're looking to hire as their replacement. Sean Casten is a fabulous candidate, and so he really developed in a variety of different ways for the long term. Peter Roskam, we literally started hammering him from January 2017 until the end. And the beautiful thing with Peter Roskam was that he had left himself so vulnerable on so many different fronts on the issues. So whether you cared about education, whether you cared about women and children, whether you cared about immigration, whether you cared about financing of the federal government, he was essentially the person writing off all the checkbooks on Donald Trump's policies. So any part of the Trump agenda, Peter Roskam had his hands dirty as sin, which was wonderful. He was a wonderfully easy villain.
Yeah, you could paint him as a villain. Now, how did you make those issues resonate with the people you were talking to, with the voters? How did you get that across?
We did all sorts of things, whether it was protesting in mass. We drove his popularity down below Trump. At the end of when he was running, he had a 27% popularity, which was lovely in the district. By, again, showing how unresponsive and not a representative that we're looking for. We also made a variety of different documents and had a variety of different ways to get the word out on social media. Indivisible DuPage had this document that taught people about where Peter Roskam stood on the issues, and on the flip side, went and motivated them to get involved with one of our organizations, to register to vote, to then literally go vote. So we had to get out the vote message right on the backside of this is why Peter Roskam needs to go. And
needs to find another line of work.
Exactly.
Yes. Now let me switch gears though, because you've also started recently a consulting business. Strangely enough, in politics, as a political consultant. So talk a little bit about that, what you hope to achieve and how you came to make this decision to go for it.
Yes. Well, it's been an amazing progression locally of our candidates. And one of the things that I realized after working with State Senator Laura Ellman and a variety of the candidates in 2018 and 2019 is that the Republicans now are ready for us. The game has now changed quite a bit. They're challenging us at a variety of different levels because now they realize that we can win.
Yeah.
And many of us realize that we can win, which means that we have to do more and we have to up our game in order to continue to win. So in particular, 2020 locally is going to be a very challenging scene, and we have a great opportunity to take over our county board.
Because you've already gotten a fairly good size chunk of the seats, right?
7 out of 12.
12.
Or sorry, well, of the last election, there was 12 up, and we did win 7.
Okay.
And the board in total has 18 board members with a chair, county board chair.
So you need 10
Right.
total.
So we just need 3 more. And it's totally doable. There's 6 people up in the next election in 2020. We just need to win 3, and that'll be a very good point to be at for being a Democrat. So the part in things that I bring to a consulting company is that I've been very active as a activist leader.
And before we go there, I want to point out to our audience that 10 years ago, every seat on the DuPage County Board was held by a Republican, right? And so the idea of having 7 now is significant.
Right. Well, we've varied. There was a point at which it was, I think that there was a point at which we had 3 at the very most. In 2016, we just had 1. And that one had won by 49 votes. Every vote matters.
Oh, yes.
And those 49 votes were not known of until December, mid-December, when the election had ended in November. So
yes, I've been involved in races that were decided by even fewer votes than that, so I understand the importance of every vote.
Exactly.
Right.
And so in particular, I think that our field game is going to be something that is absolutely essential. I'm very interested in the data side and the field side of a campaign. The strategy is something that thoroughly intrigues me from a political history perspective. And I'm very active in social media I have 2 podcasts that I'm very much.
I think we've put that up on our key for you, so
Thank you.
anybody watching should be able to tune into your podcast. You can welcome to say it out loud too. So
it is ltdotv.podbean.com, and that one is focused on political how-to. So people that have never canvassed, that have never phone banked, or have never done the basics of the political things that we need to do. That is what we go through. We also, our next episodes are going to be on Google, because a lot of our organizing is through the variety of Google things. And then the other podcast that I have is idptv.podbean.com. And that one is focused on interviews with local candidates.
sort of like what I do here.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay. Well, welcome to the club.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, I've interviewed my share of candidates over the years. We've been doing this show for about 13, 14 years now. So yes, a lot of people running for office have come through.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it is. It's actually nice to be able to sit down, as I'm sure you discovered, and one-on-one with a candidate and say, well, tell me why you're running, and be able to ask them, real questions and say, well, what about, this issue, or what about that issue, and realize that, you're not going to be interrupted by someone else. That it's, you get that time. It's nice, isn't it?
It is, and it's much appreciated.
Yeah. So, where do you expect to take your consulting business? What's your long-term goal here?
Is to help the candidates locally have more viability in our races. We've had to move to a more professional level. They can't just rely on volunteers anymore. They need to up their game. The races are much more competitive because they're more winnable.
Well, and also, as you've pointed out, the other side has recognized that this is a real threat, and they're going to throw more resources behind it than they may have in the past.
Right. Dan Cronin has a $500,000 war chest right now at the minimum, last time I checked, and that's a bit of money to start throwing at us.
But as you've discovered, money isn't everything. I mean, it helps. You can't do it on no money, but the biggest spenders are not always the winners.
Exactly.
And I think it's an important message for people to understand as well. As we talked about earlier in the show, you know, apathy is a tool, it's a weapon of politics. Oh, don't bother. You can't win. Don't even try. And part of that is, oh, you got no money. How are you going to do this? And the answer is, as you've shown and your group has shown, you can do it on a shoestring, right?
Mm-hmm. You can. It's organization, it's people power, and it's having the issues on your right side. And when you can explain what the elected people that represent us are actually doing, and I think that that's usually a far cry from what people are hoping that they were doing.
Or may believe that they are doing.
Right. And so when with a little sunshine and the hope of actually having in actual candidates that are running, we can do a lot.
Yes, I'm happy to hear you say that, because I always believe that the hardest step, of course, is the first. And getting people involved is the key to making change. And if you want to make change, you have to get involved at some point, right? But that can be any number of different things. Like, give me some examples of the things that you work with your team about.
For example, we try to meet people at any level that they're at, whether it's getting people to like something or pass something along on Facebook, something as little or as small time and whatnot as that. There's a lot of witness slips that we've needed that can be done on Facebook.
Witness slips, meaning you want to testify before a governmental body? Is that?
No. For example, say for the for a variety of the different bills that came up, the state reps really needed to hear what their constituents thought about RH, the women's reproductive health care bill, and the marijuana legislation and the fair tax were the main ones that were really being asked about. And then also we have to be able to bring new people in on a variety of different levels. So postcarding and writing postcards is very popular. Knocking on doors with each other is also the most effective way of getting out the vote. Phone banking is extremely helpful, and we've done that in a variety of different technical ways that have become more efficient. Texting at home is extremely helpful. But in all reality, each of the different campaigns is like a little company, so they need help on their communications, on their technology, on their volunteer management, on their fundraising and events. So there's all sorts of things that need to go into that candidate being a viable candidate.
So really, you're a management consultant.
In all reality, yes.
When it comes to how to manage a campaign and how to manage a candidate.
It is totally, it's exactly that. It's business management. And I've been a small business owner for 12 years previous to now, so that comes in handy.
Yes, so now you're just going into a different small business, right? A one-person consulting?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Diane, believe it or not, we're out of time already. Yes. So thank you so much for being here. It's really been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
As you may be surprised to hear, I love talking about politics. So you're welcome to come back anytime.
Thank you, Kevin.
And thank you for joining us once again on Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. You can find us every Saturday night at 8 on Comcast Channel 19, or see us on the web at publicperspective.tv. So till next time, thank you and good night.